Okay, let's do it. Good morning, all. I'm going to call this meeting of the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency's Advisory Planning Commission to order. Today is Wednesday, January 11th, 2023. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Let's make it a good one. It is 9:30. Thank you all for joining us. And the first item on the agenda is the roll call to determine a quorum. Tracy, over to you.
Mr. Oling,
Present.
Ms. Carr,
I am here, thank you.
Ms. Chandler,
Present.
Mr. Drake,
Present.
Mr. Drew, Mr. Ferry,
Present.
Ms. Ferris,
Here.
Mr. Gavon, Mr. Hill,
Good morning.
Ms. Jacobson,
Here.
Mr. Letton,
I'm here.
Ms. Morales O'Neill,
Present.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Present.
Ms. Simon, Ms. Stala,
Here.
Mr. Teixeira,
Ahoy.
Mr. Smokey, and Ms. Wyke.
Present.
Mr. Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate it. Just gonna make a note of who is here. All right, I'm gonna go over the meeting rules here briefly. Bear with me. For members of the public to observe the meeting, go to trpa.gov. Under the calendar header, click on APC meeting, January 11, 2023. There you'll find a link to our webinar. To APC members, to address APC members directly with your comments, raise your hand in Zoom by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen at the appropriate agenda item. If your hand raised, you'll be unmuted by a TRPA staff member and have 3 minutes to address the Advisory Planning Commission. If you've used the dial-in numbers to join us by telephone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand and you'll be unmuted. To my fellow APC members, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can find the hand icon at the bottom of your screen. Remote APC members, which we are all remote today, I'll just make a note. This is a virtual only meeting. No in-person attendance is happening because of the snow. We'll probably go back to a hybrid meeting format next month unless we have another big storm. We'll see. So we're all virtual. Please do not use the chat box to make comments or have sidebar conversations. Please remember to mute your microphone unless you'd like to be heard. Finally, please turn on your cameras if you're able to do so. I will now go to item 2, which is approval of the agenda. Staff, any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chairman, there are no changes.
Thank you, John. We will deem the agenda approved as posted for the record. And I'll go to item 3. This is public interest comments. If any member of the public wishes to address the Advisory Planning Commission, please raise your hand now by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Public comments should be brief and concise. Please note the APC is prohibited by law from taking immediate action on or discussing issues raised by the public that are not on our agenda. And I'm going to turn this over to you, Catherine. Members of the public, this is your chance for open comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have one hand raised. Doug Flaherty, if you unmute, you can address the APC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will there be an opportunity for public interest comments at the end of the meeting per the agenda?
Yes, sir. We will conclude with item. Bear with me a second. It's a long one. Item 7, public interest comments, where the public will have an opportunity for closing comments. So item 7 towards the end of our agenda.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and comment at that time. Thank you.
All right, Doug, thank you.
Mr. Chair, we have another hand raised. Kirk Robinson, if you unmute, you can address the commission.
Yes, my name's Kirk Robinson. I'm new to your process here, and related to the previous question, if we are interested in a particular agenda item, will there be time to comment at that point in time in the meeting, or is the first and last agenda items the only public comment period?
Kirk, we will have public comment for each of the public hearing items individually. You'll have an opportunity with each one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
All right, Catherine, thank you. Thank you for your engagement to the public. We appreciate you being here. All right, on to item 4, disposition of minutes. We do have a set of minutes from our field trip, which, believe it or not, our last meeting was October 12th, 2022. We had a nice field trip out at the state park looking at the meadow restoration project. It's on page 4 of your packets. Pretty abbreviated minutes compared to what we usually get since it was a field tour. Any questions or comments from APC members on the minutes as they were posted? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Ellery.
Second.
Thanks, Garth. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any objections or abstentions?
I abstain, Chairman Ferry. I was not present.
Thanks, Crystal.
And I also have to abstain as I was not present. This is Susan.
Thanks, Susan.
This is Courtney. I have to abstain as well.
Thank you, Courtney.
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't present, but the minutes are pretty straightforward and I feel comfortable approving them unless Councilor Marshall says I should not.
Councilor Marshall, any comment?
You may vote on the minutes even if you weren't there.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
So I'm a aye.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, sounds like we have a majority of approvers on the minutes. We will approve those as posted. Thank you, Tracy, for doing those. And I'm going to move us on to our public hearings for the day. The first item is item 5A, and this is a possible recommendation of an amendment to Plan Area Statement 146, Emerald Bay, and Plan Area Statement 147, Paradise Flat, to incorporate 6 parcels into the boundary of the Paradise Flat Plan Area Statement, currently located in the Emerald Bay Plan Area Statement. These are assessors parcel numbers 017, 041, 017, 018, 025, 027, 029, and 031, located in the El Dorado County Route 89 corridor. Information can be found on page 7 of your packet. And I'm going to pass this to Alyssa Bettinger with TRPA to present on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Ferry, and good morning, members of the commission. I'm Alyssa Bettinger, Senior Planner with TRPA. As Brendan mentioned, the first item that I'm bringing forward this morning is the amendment to the Emerald Bay Plan Area Statement 146 and the Paradise Flat Plan Area Statement 147. Next slide, please. And both of the amendments that you'll hear today are map corrections to the boundaries of the local plan documents, which means that we are amending the regional plan map. Next slide, please. And to give a bit of context before I get into the details, with the 1987 regional plan, TRPA adopted a set of plan areas that specify how particular areas should be regulated to achieve environmental and land use objectives. Plan area statements and community plans are sort of the original zoning documents that predate the area plans that we're moving towards now. And as many of you know, a lot of these documents are still used as our primary zoning documents today. Again, both of the amendments today are focused on plan area statement and community plans, not area plans. And the original plan area maps were drawn on Mylar maps. You can see the map on the right hand of your slide. They were a lot less detailed than the maps that we have today. Next slide. And over time, as our GIS technology got better, we transitioned from those old Mylar maps to our new GIS systems. And as we went through that transition, there were various errors that occurred. So today you'll see a couple different examples of issues that we've identified when moving between those two systems. The first is an error that incorrectly omitted one of the original Mylar maps when the West Shore was digitized. Next slide, please. And so zooming in on the specific area, again, the amendment would move 6 parcels from the Emerald Bay Plan Area Statement to the Paradise Flat Plan Area Statement. You can see that the parcels in question are currently included in the area shown in purple on the map. For reference, these parcels are just north of the DL Bliss State Park boundary and just south of the Rubicon residential subdivision. For those of you who are more familiar with the area, these parcels are on the ring roads. Next slide, please. Again, this amendment would move these 6 parcels from the Emerald Bay Plan Area Statement to the Paradise Flat Plan Area Statement. Because one of the original Mylar maps was omitted from the record when this area was digitized, these parcels were mistakenly included in the Emerald Bay Plan Area Statement, which has a conservation land use designation. These 6 parcels currently have single-family homes that have been grandfathered in over the years and are currently being used year-round. But because they are included in the Emerald Bay Plan Area Statement, they're classified as summer homes, because that's the only residential designation that is allowed in this plan area. This specific area does not allow for single-family residential homes. So the proposed amendment would move these parcels into the Paradise Flat Plan Area Statement, where the primary land use designation is residential. And I do want to note that none of the allowable uses are changing in either of the plan documents. This amendment is simply moving the 6 parcels from one document to the other. Next slide, please. So with that, staff recommends that the Advisory Planning Commission recommend to Governing Board to adopt the findings included in Attachment B and adopt the ordinance included in Attachment A. Next slide, please. And I will pass it over to Mr. Ferry.
Thanks, Alyssa. Appreciate it. Seems pretty straightforward, but I will go to my APC members first for questions or comments based on what Alyssa just presented.
Brendan,
Please.
if I could just add one comment to Alyssa's great staff report.
Sure, John.
Which is essentially why it's coming to you. We can't do technical corrections to maps for staff purposes. So it's coming to you and then to the governing board because the governing board adopted the official digitized map when we redid the regional plan and adopted the GIS layers as the maps in 2012.
Thank you, John, for that added information. APC members, questions or comments? Go ahead, raise your hand. Ms. Carr, go ahead.
Thank you. I don't know that it necessarily changes my thinking on the matter, but as I was reading the IEC, there was discussion about residential single-family homes versus summer homes. Is there a difference between a summer home and a home that's used in the summer. If it's just a single family residential property and people are just there in the summertime, does that become non-conforming?
No, so a summer home would be like typically like a Forest Service home that's not winterized. So people generally wouldn't be there in the winter. There wouldn't be, plowed roads. A home that is just not being used during the winter months that would still typically have services. And the folks who own that home would be able to use it year round if they wanted to.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. Ms. Stoller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I heard this right, but I just wanted to confirm that all 6 parcels are currently developed with year-round single-family homes.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ellery. Mr. Hitchcock.
Yes, Alyssa, are there any other private in-holdings within this area that should also be captured, or the parcels across Emerald Bay, across the highway on the other side, those are all in public ownership and vacant, I assume?
Yeah, so there's 2 parcels that are just northwest of the 6 parcels. Those are private parcels that are owned by a water trust right now. So we thought it would be most appropriate if they remained in the Emerald Bay Plan Area Statement. The parcels right across from the highway, those are conservancy parcels. So those are public ownership.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Hitch. Other APC members. Ms. Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you, Alyssa, for the presentation. I appreciate it. I'm just wondering, are there any intentions of those property owners to do expansions of their homes? Have you heard from those folks? Just kind of curious whether or not, they have come to you with intention to do expansion or anything on their property?
Yeah, so the reason one of the reasons that this amendment is being brought forward is one of the property owners did come in for a permit. And at that time, we were going to give it the designation of a summer home, which was sort of in conflict with what those homes are actually being used or what those homes actually are. And so that is why we are bringing forward this amendment right now. Beyond that, I am not sure if there are plans for the property owners to do any other expansions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Hitch, I'm assuming you're good, even though your hand's still up.
I apologize.
Put that hand down. Okay. Other APC members. How we feeling? I'm just gonna state, these parcels are in El Dorado County, and if governing board approves this action, it's not gonna change any of the county's zoning ordinance or general plan association with these parcels. It was a TRPA action. So. Mr. Teixeira, yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate Crystal's question, which was germane, but it seems to me the fundamental issue here was brought up by the transition of the mapping from the old Mylar to the digitizing, and that regardless of whether a property owner wanted to do something and brought that forward, the map change still needs to be made in my humble view.
Thank you for the comment. All right, last call for APC members before we go to the public. Okay, I'm going to now move us over to public comment on this item. Again, to participate in the meeting, go to trpa.gov and the calendar, click on APC meeting, January 11, 2023. There you'll find a link to our webinar. And if any member of the public wishes to address the APC on this item, now is your chance. please go ahead and raise your hand by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you will be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member.
Mr. Chair, we have a few hands raised. Jan Briscoe, if you unmute, you can address the APC.
Good morning, APC members. Jan Briscoe calling. Just wanted to let you know that the property owners in this area support this amendment, and very happy to have it cleaned up after 30-some years. But I think that hopefully your recommendation will be to approve this amendment to the governing board. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Briscoe.
The next hand raised is Doug Flaherty. Doug, if you unmute, you can address the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. TahoeCleanAir.org is opposed to this amendment simply because I do not feel that there's been an adequate analysis based on significant data that the project will not increase vehicle miles traveled, and also that the project will increase year-round capacity. There has to be a reason why that was originally placed in summer use. And these are the kind of incremental decisions or requests that the APC has notoriously approved over the years to go to the board. Basically the APC's job is not to rubber stamp TRPA staff recommendations, is to perform analysis and protect Lake Tahoe's clarity. Lake Tahoe is an impaired water under the Clean Air Act. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty, for your comment. We appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
I see Mr. Childs or hand up there.
Yeah, Josh, is your hand raised for a reason to jump in?
He says no in the chat. Josh is our IT support.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe, there we go. Hand is down. Okay, so Catherine, no more hands raised?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. No other hands are raised.
Thank you. So just to talk about Mr. Flaherty's comment real quick, thank you for that comment. I mean, it sounds, based on Alyssa's presentation, this seems like it truly is just a mapping error that's being corrected. And we're not, since these parcels are developed with single family year-round homes currently, we're trying to correct the mapping error. There was a environmental analysis done by Alyssa, which is included in the packet. Air quality is one of those items. You know, from my perspective, I definitely appreciate your comment. I think there's no dispute that all of us are dedicated to Lake Tahoe and preserving its air quality and water quality. And that's a reason why a lot of us do our jobs. So I think I can speak for us, Mr. Flaherty, in saying that we all support what you spoke on. From my perspective, I'm not seeing, an increase in capacity or a real threat here, since these parcels are already developed in such a fashion that's consistent with a single family zoned parcel, which is what these are. I don't know if any other APC members want to weigh in on that at all before we go ahead and take a vote on this, but I'll give you a chance. Ms. Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Ferry. I agree and appreciate Commissioner Teixeira's comments earlier too. I was just curious kind of about the intentions of the property owners. We have, having, worked for Placer County for 19 years, we see mapping errors all the time. And so I appreciate TRPA staff for bringing forward and, willing to kind of address issues that related to mapping errors. And so I concur with your comments, Brendan. Definitely appreciate, the concern. But it does look, based upon my review of this, that this was indeed a mapping error, and the analysis has certainly been done to identify, potential impacts. So I concur with you on this.
Thanks, Crystal. Mr. Hitchcock.
Yeah, I concur with your comments, and I understand the comment from members public, but from my perspective here, this is truly a mapping error. And also these are existing developed parcels. So from a air quality VMT perspective, I don't see it resulting in any increase, because the VMT standard itself is based on units and miles, as opposed to size of a structure itself. Thanks.
Thanks, Hitch.
Hey, Brendan, this is John Marshall. Can you close public comment, please?
Sorry. Yes, I will close public comment. APC members, any other thoughts on this before we go to a vote? Okay. I'm going to ask that an APC member makes the first motion to recommend approval of the required findings as described in attachment B, including a finding of no significant effect for adoption of the plan area statement amendment as described in the staff report.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair. Do you need me to read it again?
What do you think, Marshall? Should we read it?
No, you can just, Steve, indicate that you'll make that motion as so stated.
For the record, I will make the motion as described in agenda item 5A number 1. As read by the chairman.
This is Sue Chandler. I'll second that.
Thank you, Susan. Tracy, I'm going to go to you for a roll call vote. Since we're virtual, I think we need to roll call vote all these. So bear with us all.
Mr. Olling,
Aye.
Ms. Chandler,
Approve.
Mr. Drake,
Approved.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Gavon, Ms. Morales O'Neill,
Approve.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Simon, Ms. Stala,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Ms. Wyke,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Mr. Smokey, Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Okay,
I'm happy to continue, Mr. Chairman, if that is okay with you.
there we go, Steve. Go ahead.
So I'd like to make the motion described in our packet under agenda item 5A. This is number 2, a motion to recommend adoption of ordinance 2023 to be named, amending ordinance 1987-9 to amend the plan area statements as shown in our packet today as attachment A, exhibit 1.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions on that motion?
Is there a second?
Do I have a
This
second?
this is Crystal. I would second that motion.
Thank you, Crystal. Okay, Tracy, back to you. Roll call vote.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Smokey, Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Ms. Wyke,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Stala,
Yes.
Ms. Simon, Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Mr. Gavon, Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Morales O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Olling,
Yes.
Ms. Chandler,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you all. That concludes item 5A, and Alyssa is going to stay with us for the next one. We have a similar item coming up here. I will go on to item 5B, which is a possible recommendation of an amendment to Plan Area Statement 100, which is the Truckee Marsh, and the Bijou Al Tahoe Community Plan to incorporate one parcel into the boundary of the Bijou Al Tahoe Community Plan as originally approved by the City of South Lake Tahoe. This is 2833 Lake Tahoe Boulevard, South Lake Tahoe, California, currently located in the Truckee Marsh Plan Area Statement. This is assessor's parcel number 026-221-029. Information can be found on page 59 of your packet. And I'm going to go back to Alyssa to present on this one.
Thank you. As Brendan mentioned, the proposed amendment is just a similar mapping correction to the Truckee Marsh Plan Area Statement 100 and the Bijou Al Tahoe Community Plan boundaries. Next slide, please. The proposed amendment would move one parcel from the Truckee Marsh Plan Area Statement. You can see that boundary in purple on the map, to the Bijou Al Tahoe Community Plan, which is in red. This is a vacant parcel just adjacent to the bike path along Highway 50. And it is just across the bridge over Trout Creek from Meeks Lumber. You can also see on the map on the left that it is across the highway just south of Denny's and the Ross Shopping Center, and sort of directly across the street from the Lake Tahoe Community College. Next slide, please. Again, this amendment would be moving one parcel from the Truckee Marsh Plan Area Statement to the Bijou Al Tahoe Community Plan. This amendment is being brought forward because this parcel was included in the Bijou Al Tahoe Community Plan boundary when it was adopted back in 1996, as well as subsequent amendments to the community plan. At some point over time, there was a mapping error that occurred that moved this parcel back into the Truckee Marsh Plan Area Statement. According to a land capability verification that was done for this specific parcel in 2001, the parcel is primarily Class 1B or SEZ. I do want to note that if the amendment is approved, the parcel would be eligible for the permissible uses in the Bijou Al Tahoe Community Plan, but this specific parcel would still be subject to all TRPA standards, which include coverage and SEZ protection. Next slide, please. Again, I just want to point out this is our regional land use map. So you can see right now the parcel is included in, thank you, thanks Tracy. The parcel is included in the Truckee Marsh Plan Area Statement, which is primarily conservation focused. And it is outside of the community plan boundary. Next slide, please. And then these are the maps from the adoption, the adoption of the community plan and the 2020 amendment to the community plan. This parcel is right across the street from Denny's, just slightly to the south. I know these maps are a little bit hard to read. They're also included on page 92 and 94 of your packet, but you can see on the map on the left-hand side, this was the adoption of the community plan in 1996. And you can see that the parcel was included in the Bijou Al Tahoe community plan boundary, as well as the boundary of the map that was adopted during the 2020 amendment to the Bijou Al Tahoe community plan. So because of this, we need to fix the regional plan map that you saw on the last slide to be consistent with the approved boundary maps. Next slide, please. So with that, staff recommends that the Advisory Planning Commission recommend to the governing board to adopt the findings included in attachment B and adopt the ordinance included in attachment A. Next slide. And I will pass it back to Mr. Chair for committee member comments.
Thanks, Alyssa. Similar to the last one. Okay, APC members, now's your turn, and I'm going to go to Mr. Teixeira.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alyssa, perhaps you have this information. I didn't see it in the staff report, but I'm just curious. Do you know what percentage of the parcel in question is 1B and what's class 7? Just curious.
I do not off the top of my head, but I can pull it up. If we want to go to the next question, I can
Sure.
get back to you.
That's fine. Thank you.
I have the map up. It's about,
Okay.
I would say, about a little over half of the parcel is 1B.
Thank you. That's helpful.
For those that don't know, 1B means it's stream environment zone, which is typically prohibited from development
Yes.
and has a setback also, I believe. So. Okay, Mr. Drew, go to you next.
Thanks for the presentation.
Bless you.
I fully appreciate and understand this is clearly based on what you presented. This parcel was switched from being within the community plan when the community plan was adopted to not being in the community plan. And so what's being requested is fairly straightforward. I guess my comment is more to a broader situation, which is we have had a number of conversations on the APC over the last several years about parcels that are in these transition zones and may be in a position to be in a community plan. I think this parcel is actually for sale. Like there's a for sale sign there. So somebody's trying to sell it and it obviously has some developable opportunities on it. I mean, given the current weather pattern we've had for the last 2 weeks, I think it just emphasizes that these are the kinds of parcels that we should be identifying as agencies, whether it's the CTC or others, and maybe it is on their radar, because again, what's being asked for today is straightforward, but in my opinion, these are the kinds of parcels that are in these transition zones where SEZs and flooding happen around the creeks and rivers that we have. And I guess it begs a bigger question of what are we doing with these sites? Clearly the parcel's for sale and it isn't a discussion for today, but I do think it's a discussion that needs to come back to the APC at some point where we have some of these parcels that are may have been or are within community plans, but are they actually assigned appropriately? Because in my mind, this is the kind of parcel where we absolutely need to get bigger buffers around our creeks and SEZs. And so I feel like that's an important point to bring up today because this is a good example of one of those kinds of parcels. It doesn't impact what you presented. Makes sense to me. It's straightforward that this mapping error needs to be corrected. But I think the bigger picture is long term. What are we going to do with these parcels? Even if you develop the class 7 portions of that parcel, that lot, if you've ever been back in there, the adjacent parcel is exactly the same. There is a commercial building on it, and that commercial building floods regularly. So those are the kinds of things. And Brendan, maybe that's where either the city or the county for these kinds of parcels address that through the approval processes in those places. But this is certainly a great example of some cleanup that we need to do with zoning and land use applicability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for the comment, Jason. To that end, Hitch, since you're real familiar with the Bijou El Tahoe community plan, can you give the group some sense of what the zoning is within that plan for this particular parcel, what some potential uses may be?
It's primarily commercial. In discussing with the property owner in the past. There's been variations of projects proposed for this parcel and actually the one next door. The property owner is actually interested in developing both parcels and coming in off of Edgewood. Because right now, if you've ever been there, there is a entrance onto the property that's basically located in the SEZ, which couldn't be developed. And so the most logical way to develop a site would be coming in off of Edgewood and including the parcel that is north, that is adjacent to this particular one. That was a plan in the past. I'm not sure what they're proposing at this time. They did come in to talk to us, about this particular parcel. And from the city's perspective, when we adopted the plan, it was included in the visual toponym plan. And since we haven't done any amendments to that particular boundary, the city doesn't see any reason to amend our plan. From our perspective, any development will be regulated by the community plan for this particular parcel. But Drew has some valid comments, with climate change. Some of these transition parcels are going to be difficult. Well, you may be able to develop it because there is class 7, but the chance of the site flooding is probable.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I also before a site gets developed, that designation for the 1B and class 7 line should go through a land capability verification in the field. Yes. So if that line is changing or isn't drawn correctly, our process, TRPA's process, does require that line gets either verified or moved in the field by an expert. And so I think that's an important point. I totally agree with everything that's been said. Transition zone parcel, and maybe CTC does have this on the radar. I don't know if we have anyone from CTC that's attending this meeting, but we could see if they do have this on their radar. Drew, do you have another comment, or should I go to Mr. Teixeira?
Hold on.
Steve, I'll go to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to wholeheartedly agree with Jason's points. I think that, I don't know, maybe this is something for Mr. Hester, Ms. Reagan. Seems like at some point we should have an analysis of these types of transition parcels, wherever they are around the basin, given climate change. Perhaps it's an assignment for the Tahoe Science Advisory Council, but it's difficult to look at one situation here. I will support the ultimate motion because it's, as Mr. Drew said, straightforward today, but it does highlight we maybe need to do a better job protecting some of these transition areas. And certainly the weather pattern we're in now and what's going on is a perfect example of why. So I don't know if there is an ability, and maybe there is or isn't, Mr. Legal Counsel, but if there was direction from the APC potentially to say to staff, hey, we're flagging this issue, can you all figure out a way to try to look at this at a more regional scale?
Steve, I think we hear you, and I just want to caution that we're on a specific agenda item that does not agendize the broader discussion that you all want to have. So we can agendize that for separate discussion.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know that we do need to agendize it, because I think, John, this is just giving information. I hope it's not off the agenda, but we have actually been modeling with our GIS group different flood levels, because as you know, from the climate modeling, we're expected to have higher flood levels and lower lake levels, more drought, more higher storms. And we're also working on a series of what we call climate smart code amendments at the direction of the board. So hopefully we'll address that during that process, Steve. But if I'll remind staff to look at that, but it'll be coming to you at some point. So bring it up if we haven't. But I think we could avoid having to put it on the agenda if you want to.
Appreciate that, Mr. Hester. Maybe the future agenda item would be an update for the APC and others about the work that you just described ongoing.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alling, see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with staff's recommendation, and I also agree with Mr. Drew in his comments. My question is this: is it possible for a parcel to be located in two different plan area statements, or within the Truckee Marsh plan area statement and the Bijou Tahoe community plan?
Typically,
You want me to handle that one, Alyssa, or you?
sure, go for it.
That would lead to some awful lot of conflicts, Garth. So I think usually the way we do that is to have a special plan area within the larger zone. If you wanted to do something special with some subset of that plan area statement.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you, John. And the reason why I bring this up is looking at the APC packet and the map that was provided, showing the plan area statement and the subject parcel. If you go to the other side of Highway 50 and the junction of Blue Lake Avenue and Highway 50, there's a long parcel. It's sort of like the second parcel in on Blue Lake. And it appears to be split in half from the Truckee Marsh plan area statement and whatever plan area statement is just to the south. And so it looks like, and I've gone on to Tahoe Open Data, and it is one specific parcel, and it appears to be in two different plan area statements.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I interpreted your question as, could you have two plan area statements covering the same area?
No, my question is, can you have one parcel that is split into two different plan area statements?
Yes, but we generally try to avoid that. But
okay,
that's not, if there's appropriate a zoning change, a way to, describe that, then that is a possibility.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I mean, like I said, I noticed there's APN 031-103-002 appears to be split in half. And it came to my attention from the map here in the staff report. And I don't know if that's unintentional or intentional. Just thought I'd bring it to your attention.
Thank you.
Thanks, Garth. Mr. Drew, do you have another comment?
I do not. Sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
All good. Good discussion. Other APC members that would like to jump in, go ahead.
Oh yeah, this is John City. Obviously, we support this amendment because right now there is a conflict between what we've adopted and what TRPA has adopted on their GIS map.
Thanks, John. Any other thoughts before I go to the public? Okay. I'm going to now move this to public comment on this item. Again, to participate in the meeting, go to trpa.gov and the calendar, click on APC meeting, January 11, 2023. There you'll find a link to this webinar. And if any member of the public wishes to address the Advisory Planning Commission on this item, please raise your hand now by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member.
Mr. Chair, we have a hand raised. Doug Flaherty, if you unmute, you can address the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So TahoeCleanAir.org is opposed to this this action. I think it's I don't think there's been substantial data indicating the reason for the supposed error. It's interesting. We have two map errors for, parcels today that are going to potentially face development or change in yearly use. This goes back to the failure on the part of the TRPA to provide a mechanism through the environmental checklist to to assess cumulative impacts of all projects within the Lake Tahoe Basin, including the failure of the 2012 regional plan. So based on that, it's hard for me to believe that the APC would approve this at this meeting without more research. This happens to be right next to 1B, a sensitive marsh. And just to let you know, we'll be opposing adamantly any commercial building on the other portions of that parcel, primarily due to groundwater. I mean, you've got adequate proof groundwater is impacting the commercial building adjacent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty, for your comment. We appreciate it.
Mike Dill, if you unmute, you can address the commission.
Good morning, Chairman, APC Commissioners. Mike Dill here with Aspen Environmental Services. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. I represent the property owner, Jan McCarthy, and we support this amendment. We've been working with staff and the city on this for several years. And I wanted to clarify a few items. For one, we have done a land capability verification after extensive work with staff and utilizing the FEMA floodplain maps. The site was verified and that floodplain line was designated on the site. It is noted that in the floods of January of '97, no portion of this parcel was impacted by those floods. Secondly, we do not have a groundwater problem at the site, and the existing commercial building has never flooded. I will tell you that our parking lot has been impacted by overflow runoff from Edgewood Circle, but that runoff did not come from the creek and it did not come from the groundwater. Again, I want the APC to focus that this is a map correction amendment. In 1996, this property was located in the community plan and was approved not only by the city, but it was also approved by the TRPA governing board in 1996. As John Hitchcock and Alyssa pointed out, in the 2020 community plan amendment, just 3 years ago, two plus years ago, the project site was still included in the community plan. So what happened and how that mapping error occurred, it's unclear to us. But again, we support this correction and we look forward to APC's approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dill. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
Thank you, Catherine. Sorry about that. I will close public comment. And Hitch, can I ask you, just in response to Mr. Flaherty's comment, since this is in the Bijou El Tahoe community plan, if someone came in for development, I'm assuming through your MOU with TRPA, the city would probably be the permitting authority on this property. But if it, if a property comes in, say, and it requires a conditional use permit for some commercial building there, can you just quickly talk about how the city may require an environmental analysis, et cetera, on the specific action on that parcel?
Yeah, it's gonna depend on what's proposed. I mean, if it's a commercial project, generally it'd be covered under the city's MOU with TRPA, but if it does exceed a certain square footage of new gross commercial floor area, then that actually is in kicked back to TRPA for separate permitting on their end. But if the city does do the permitting under the MOU, we will be taking it through the CEQA review process as well as TRPA's environmental process. And since this project is actually going to be visible from the scenic highway corridor, it will require planning commission review and approval. So there is opportunities for public comment for any future project on this site.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful for the public to hear that, more than likely will be another discretionary action if some development does take place on that parcel, which is a publicly noticed meeting, and like John said, at the City of South Lake Tahoe's Planning Commission. So there's a good opportunity for the public to weigh in on any future action that would happen on this site, specific to the project that would happen there. So I just wanted to put that out there. Any final thoughts on this item before we go to a vote? Ms. Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think I agree with you about the fact that it goes through some additional review by the city, because at that time they will also be able to, analyze any impacts related to flooding. So that certainly makes me feel a little more comfortable with the decision today.
Thank you. Ms. Carr?
Thank you. Part of my thought was just reflected by Crystal. But the other one that I had, just a comment, I've been considering just looking purely at the packet, and certainly without throwing anyone from TRPA under the bus. I mean, it appears to me to be, a GIS tech that just drew the line in the wrong place, and we need to redraw it in the right place. And I'm glad that there are those other processes in place, but it doesn't seem like we should, in my view, be making a decision contrary to other community plan procedures and approvals that have happened over time, merely because a GIS tech or a contractor just drew the line wrong.
Thanks, Ms. Carr. And Ms. Stoller.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I agree. I also believe that this is a mapping error, and I appreciate all the information that's been provided. I also agree with Mr. Drew that this parcel does have some sensitivity to it. And at State Lands, we operate the Nevada Land Bank, and we work closely with the CTC. So I'd be happy to follow up with the CTC to see if they have this parcel on their radar.
Thank you, Ellery. I think that's a good idea. Ms. Jacobson, anything further from you? Nope. Good. Okay. Final thoughts? Okay. I would ask an APC member to make the first motion to recommend approval of the required findings as described in attachment B, including a finding of no significant effect, for adoption of the community plan and plan area statement amendment as described in the staff report.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion.
Thanks, Hitch.
Motion to recommend approval of the required findings as described in attachment B, including a finding of no significant effect for adoption of the community plan and planner statement amendment as described in staff.
This is Crystal. I'll second that motion.
Thanks, Crystal. Tracy, over to you for a roll call vote.
Ms. Chandler,
Approve.
Mr. Oling,
Yes.
Ms. Marolis O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Ms. Simon, Ms. Stoller,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Smokey, Ms. Wyke,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you, Tracy. I'd ask an APC member to make the second motion, if anyone would care to do so.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to recommend adoption of ordinance 2023 to be named later, amending ordinance number 2022-03 as previously amended, and ordinance number 1987-9 to amend the community plan and planner statement boundaries as shown in attachment A, exhibit 1.
Thanks, John. Anyone care to second that?
This is Crystal. Oh, sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
This is Crystal. I'll second that one as well.
Thanks, Crystal. Tracy, back to you. Roll call vote.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Ms. Waike,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Ms. Stala,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Ms. Marolas O'Neill,
Yes.
Mr. Orling,
Yes.
Ms. Chandler,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
thank you, Tracy. Okay. Thank you, Alyssa. Appreciate you presenting on those two items. And you're on to governing board. Good luck with that. I'm going to take us now to item 5C on our agenda. This is consideration and possible action recommending amendments to Douglas County's South Shore Area Plan to allow religious assemblies as a permitted use in the Tahoe Mixed Use Zone. Information can be found on page 111 of your packet. And I'm going to pass this to Jacob Stock with TRPA to introduce Kate Morales O'Neill and Cynthia Gregory to present on behalf of Douglas County.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, my name is Jacob Stock, Senior Planner with TRPA. I don't have any slides for you guys today. I'm just here to tee up a presentation from Douglas County staff on this proposed amendment to the South Shore Area Plan, which regards zoning for religious assemblies in the Tahoe Mixed Use Zone. Following any comment from the commissioner, from the public, I'll ask for your recommendation to the governing board regarding staff's review of this item. We've reviewed the IEC, we've reviewed conformance, and we see no issues, no conformance issues or environmental issues with this item, and we recommend adoption per the commission's wishes. So a little background on area plan. Since 2012, since the 2012 regional plan update, TRPA has encouraged local jurisdictions to develop area plans to replace local planning documents like community plans or like the plan area statements that you were discussing in the items preceding this one. Area plans allow jurisdictions greater autonomy to define and manage their local land use, but they also maintain compliance with the TRPA regional plan. The South Shore Area Plan was approved in 2013. It encompasses the South State Line area. So this extends from the shoreline in the north to Pinecrest Drive on Lower Kingsbury to the south, and from the California-Nevada state line to Burke Creek, which is about where the UPS store is, if you all are familiar with that. So that is the planning area for the South Shore Area Plan. The plan includes 2 town centers, the Nevada Resort Casino Core and the Kingsbury Commercial Town Center along Lower Kingsbury. The proposed amendment that's before you today aims to change religious assemblies from a special to an allowed use in the town center along Lower Kingsbury. And this would eliminate the need for hearings officer review of religious assembly uses. And you'll be hearing more from Douglas County staff about the need for this amendment, but I'll just add quickly that this amendment is important for bringing the South Shore Area Plan into conformance with the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, which is a federal law regarding zoning for religious assemblies. A text amendment applying this change to the Douglas County Code was adopted on September 1st, 2022. Governing board approval is still required for the amendment to go into effect. And again, TRPA staff have reviewed the IEC and have reviewed the proposed amendment for conformance, and we see no issues with the proposed amendment. So we recommend approval. Based on your recommendation today, Douglas County will work with TRPA staff to complete any necessary revisions and bring the amendment back to RPIC for a formal hearing and then to governing board for consideration of approval. And with that, I will pass it on to your colleague, Kate Morales O'Neill, in her capacity as Douglas County's principal planner, to share more information on this proposed amendment.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jacob. Again, Kate Morales. I know my name is difficult. Everyone says Morales, and I never get offended because even here in my office, they still call me Morales. So no A's, all O's. So it's Morales O'Neill, Douglas County Principal Planner. And I want to thank all of you for your time today. And I do hope you and yours continue to stay safe in this crazy weather we're experiencing, well, at least here in the Valley. I've only been here a couple of years, but the residents here said they haven't seen it like this in the Valley for like 30 plus years. So anyway, I hope all of you stay safe. I also have present today Cynthia Gregory from Douglas County Deputy DA's office, assisting with the presentation today in case we have any questions that she might have to address. As Jacob has already mentioned, our goal here today is to provide you with some background information and staff recommendation to assess and recommend a zoning modification in the Tahoe mixed use zoning. Currently, religious assemblies require a special use permit, and we believe that it is imperative that we eliminate the need for a special use permit. Next slide, please. In November of 2021, the synagogue located in the Tahoe mixed use zoning was required to get a special use permit in order to hold their religious assemblies. While our staff was processing the application, it became very apparent that there were striking similarities between the definition of religious assembly and membership organizations. I won't read these to you, but will point out they both promote the interests of its respective group, and both are consistent with the zone's use. Next slide, please. Staff also discovered while processing the application that based on the definitions noted here, the religious assembly use is entirely consistent with the Tahoe mixed use zoning district, which specifically allows public service use. You can see here what it currently states in code regarding use, and religious assemblies are required to obtain a special use permit. And then you'll see membership organizations are permitted as an allowed use. Last slide, thank you. In conclusion, and most importantly, approving this amendment would eliminate any perception of discrimination based on the federal law known as our LUPA, which Jacob previously mentioned, Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act. Staff strongly believes it is imperative we stay consistent with area plan regulations and federal law. And that does, again, thank you for your time today. That concludes my presentation. And if you have any questions, Cynthia and I will do our best to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob and Miss Morales O'Neill.
Well done, Brendan.
Apologize. I'm gonna try harder on that one.
Honest to goodness, you don't have to apologize. It happens on a daily basis.
You can call me Brandon. That's my that's what everyone does to me. Okay, thank you so much for those presentations. And I'm going to go now to my fellow APC members for questions or comments.
Mr. Chairman, did Councilor Gregory have something that she wanted to add to the presentation?
Ms. Gregory, would you care to add anything?
Cynthia Gregory from the Douglas County District Attorney's Office. Thank you, Mr. Teixeira. Just very briefly, this is important for Douglas County. The Religious Land Use Institutionalized Persons Act was passed in 2000 by the federal government, and basically it requires that governments treat houses of worship as favorably as non-religious groups. And if you take a look at page 120 of your packet, you'll notice that Membership organizations within this land use are allowed, cultural facilities are allowed, whereas religious institutions are required a special use permit. So this does appear, at least on its face, that Douglas County is requiring additional burdens on religious institutions, and therefore we would request this change to make sure that we're compliant with the law. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I know that Mr. Marshall is also familiar with this issue as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gregory. Appreciate it. Thanks, Steve, for opening that up. APC members, who has any questions or comments? Ms. Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just had a question about design review. I was reading through the packet. It looked like, you know, uses that are allowed by right do go through some sort of design review. So I was wondering if that can be, if you can kind of elaborate on that, and also, you know, is that design review is it, you know, a public forum, a place where folks can weigh in on? And so this would really apply to the, you know, to the religious facility, but also the membership organization type use. Like what type of review do they go through to address, you know, design and development standards, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can answer from the TRPA side. It would go through a staff level review as an allowed use. Currently, it requires, as a special use, requires a hearings officer review, so that would be a public hearing. However, there is an opportunity for appeal. So there could be an opportunity for you know, a public forum for review for something like this. But if anyone would like to elaborate.
Well, I can, from the Douglas County side. So when you apply for a special permit, for example, for this special use permit, they did have to apply for one. And special use permit goes to our planning commission. It is not a board of commissioner, county commissioner level. It goes to the planning commission for final decision maker. However, in this particular incident, it was approved by the planning commission. But because of the discrepancy and the code, it did go to the Board of County Commissioners, who did deny the actual approval, but then was reheard again. As we were processing this application, we started running into this issue of our LUPA and realized that we have to address this and this has to change. So from a county standpoint, that's what happened with us. It was reheard and then it was obviously approved and the ordinance was passed back in September of 2022.
Thank you. And does it also go through design review with Douglas County? Is there I mean, it sounds like it goes through a TRPA design review, but just curious about that.
Yes, so when they apply for the special use permit, it's not a design review that we would typically do like on a project. It's not the same type of design review, but we're basically just looking at land use and zoning and ensuring that it's being utilized for the proper use.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that discussion. Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I've followed this process all the way through from the beginnings at Douglas County through the Planning Commission. And as Ms. Morales O'Neill indicated, you know, the Board of County Commissioners denied based on an appeal. So this is an existing building on Kingsbury Grade, and the tenants in the building objected based on some parking concerns that they had. And the Board of County Commissioners the majority tended to agree with them. However, after an important Jewish organization in the region indicated that there was a problem with a violation of federal law, the commissioners rethought that and made the right decision. So this is a really important clarification to make. in the mixed use area there in Kingsbury. And I know this has been heard already by the TRPA Regional Plan Implementation Committee as an informational item, but clearly this is an issue that needs to be addressed and dealt with so that there is no there are no further allegations of religious discrimination with this particular building and the tenants therein. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Ms. Chandler.
Yes, Steve, for clarification, has the parking issue been resolved?
Yes, there was really no parking issue. That was what the other tenants were using as a reason for their objections. But it's not an issue any longer, to answer your question directly. Thank you.
Thank you. Other APC members? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move us to public comment on this item. Again, to participate in the meeting, go to trpa.gov and the calendar, click on APC meeting, January 11, 2023. There you'll find a link to the public webinar hosted on Zoom. If any member of the public wishes to address the Advisory Planning Commission on this item, now is your chance. Please raise your hand and click on by clicking on the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or by dialing *9 on your telephone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member.
Mr. Chair, we have one hand raised. Doug Flaherty, if you unmute, you can address the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to speak as an individual resident and property owner in the Lake Tahoe Basin. I'm in wholehearted support as an individual that this be approved. I'm a little bit disturbed of the picture that was painted by Mr. Cicera, who it was an obvious attempted note to point out that the Douglas County Commissioners denied this over parking. And he specifically used the religious term of Jewish. I don't know what that has to do with anything. I thought it was insensitive, inappropriate, and probably one of the reasons he needs to be removed from some of these committees is a conflict of interest that he has. But anyway, thank you for asking the question, I believe, Susan, to see if the parking issue was resolved. He didn't mention that. So it's a tremendous amount of bias there, I thought. So having said that, just as a resident, we certainly want to support freedom of religion and assembly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty.
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
Thank you, Catherine. I will go ahead and close the public comment period. Steve, I don't know if you want to respond in any way. I'll give you the opportunity, but you don't have to.
I don't believe I need to respond.
Thank you, Steve. Any final thoughts from APC members on this item before we go to the motions? Okay, I would ask one of my APC members to make the first motion, as you can see on the slide there.
This is Susan. I'd like to make the motion, please.
Go ahead, Susan. Thank you.
A motion to recommend approval of the required findings as described in attachment D, including a finding of no significant effect for adoption of the area plan amendment as described in the staff summary.
Thank you.
I will second.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. Got a first and a second. Tracy, I'm going to go to you for a roll call vote.
Mr. Rowling,
Yes.
Ms. Chandler,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Marolis O'Neill.
Can I'm not sure if I have to abstain if I present it. I'm not sure, John. Yeah.
No, you don't. You can vote.
Okay, yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Stoller,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Ms. Waikey,
Yes.
Mr. Ferry.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
thank you, Tracy. On to the second motion. Anyone care to make that one?
This is
This
Crystal.
is Susan. I can make it again.
Oh.
A motion to recommend adoption of ordinance 2023, amending ordinance 2013-05 to amend the Douglas County South Shore Area Plan as shown in attachment C.
Thank you, Susan.
And I'll second again.
Thank you, Ms.
Jennifer.
Carr. Got a first and a second, and back to you, Tracy.
Ms. Waikey,
Yes.
Mr. Hitchcock,
Yes.
Ms. Ferris,
Yes.
Mr. Letton,
Yes.
Ms. Stoller,
Yes.
Mr. Teixeira,
Yes.
Ms. Jacobson,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Drew,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Ms. Chandler,
Yes.
Ms. Carr,
Yes.
Mr. Orling,
Yes.
Ms. Marolis O'Neill,
Yes.
and Mr. Ferry.
Yes,
Mr. Chair, the motion passes.
thank you, Tracy. Okay. We've done our work on that item. Thank you all for engaging. Appreciate it. And I'm gonna move us on our agenda. We are going to item 5D now, and this is a Lake Tahoe West Shore update. Got two items. And first, we're gonna start with a briefing on the Meeks Bay Restoration Project. I'm gonna pass this over to Rebecca Cremeen with TRPA to present on this item. Over to you, Rebecca.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. You'll see in your packet that this is a combined item as a West Shore update, but we decided to break it out and really focus on each one of these components as a separate presentation. And we can pause at the end of the Meeks Bay presentation for questions you might have, and then move on to the 89 corridor plan. Next slide, please. So today's presentation, we'll be focusing on a high priority environmental improvement project, which is the Meeks Bay Restoration Project. The focus of this project is to restore Meeks Creek to a more natural condition and to improve the recreation experience at this popular West Shore destination. Meeks Bay is also a very special place for the Washoe people. It's long been a summer destination and location for summer gatherings, ceremonial purposes, and to collect culturally significant plants. So why are we bringing this to you now? This is an informational item, and we wanted to give you a preview before we brought this before you for consideration of the environmental document, which will be likely in April or May to certify. And because the APC has not had the opportunity to hear about this project, we wanted to give you a preview now. So today I'll walk you through the project purpose and need, public and stakeholder engagement over the last 2 years, including any concerns raised during this environmental process, and then how we developed the preferred alternative for the environmental analysis by incorporating that input. We did present this to governing board a couple of times, as well as the regional plan implementation committee during the public comment period for the environmental document, as well as during the scoping period. So with that, next slide, please. Okay. So for those who are not familiar with Meeks Bay, this slide shows you the orientation on the West Shore. Meeks Bay is located just south of Sugar Pine Point State Park and north of Emerald Bay. There are some communities along the way and access from this area into the Desolation Wilderness. Planning for this restoration project is a partnership between the Forest Service, TRPA, and the Lahontan Regional Water Quality Control Board. And we're preparing a triple joint environmental document like we do here often that meets both National Environmental Policy Act, California Environmental Quality Act, and TRPA environmental requirements. And TRPA is managing the environmental contract and the public engagement through a cooperative agreement with the Forest Service, which is funded by the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. So it's been a great team to work with throughout this whole process. We hired a consulting firm, Ascent Environmental, to work with us on the environmental analysis joint document, as well as CBI, which is the Consensus Building Institute. And they were our dream team during the shoreline plan. So we thought they'd be a great match for this project as well. We've also been working with a stakeholder advisory group, and that group is consisting of folks in the area, some of the homeowners, the League to Save Lake Tahoe, the Washoe Tribe, the Meeks Bay Fire District, the Marina Associations, and Friends of the West Shore. Next slide. So zooming in here on the restoration project area, this is hopefully to orient you a little better here. Right in the middle of the screen, you'll see the lagoon, and that was dredged in 1960 for the Meeks Bay Marina. So that is, since the marina infrastructure has been removed by the Forest Service to treat AIS, aquatic invasive species. They've been doing some work on that the last couple of years. And the last time the marina actually operated was in 2015. And to the north, so the north side of the site is managed by the Washoe Tribe, and that is the Meeks Bay Resort. And there you'll find mostly RV camping, really popular beach, snack shack, rentals, and there's also some cabins up there. And to the south is the Meeks Bay campground, as well as beach. There's a day use area. And those two sides of Meeks Bay cannot really be accessed by foot. You'll see that dredged channel in the middle of the screen, and that's where the boats would enter into the marina. And so you can't really cross that right now. You'd have to walk back out to the highway and then over the 89 bridge and then up to get to either side. To the west, you'll see the little bubble of the project area includes a portion of the Meeks Meadow area. So that work, there's work being done right now by the Washoe Tribe to restore that meadow, remove conifers, and this project really does complement that. Next slide. So as I mentioned, that this is some of the work that's being done at Meeks Meadow. And here's some cool pictures of the Washoe Tribe and some of their partners working to remove conifers in the meadow and bringing the youth out there to engage in a lot of those activities. Next slide. So restoring Meeks Creek also ties into other plans and programs on the West Shore and around Lake Tahoe. Improving the Meeks Creek watershed is complementary to the ecosystem improvements and planning with the Lake Tahoe West project. The recreation improvements at Meeks Bay are also being coordinated with the 89 recreation corridor transportation planning, which you'll hear about later on my next presentation. And working with the stakeholders for this project, identified the need for better coordination to emergency response. So this spurred the lake-based safety strategy that's referred on the screen. So I think you've heard from us on that project, which identifies facilities to moor and provide the best access for fire and other emergency response providers. And lastly, any of the recreation improvements that affect the shoreline would need to be consistent with the 2018 Lake Tahoe Shoreline Plan ordinances. Next slide. So now I'll walk you through the need for this project and what we hope to achieve. This image shows Meeks Creek prior to building the marina. So the stream deposited sediment and the beach was a barrier beach system similar to Taylor and Tallac Creeks. This is what the Forest Service hopes to achieve with the restoration project, to bring the stream to a more natural condition and to restore some of those beach and lake processes. The image on the right is a more recent shot of the marina with the slips and boats in them. Next slide. So improving the hydrologic function of the stream and barrier beach will provide habitat for both common and special status species, including Tahoe yellowcrest and Lahontan cutthroat trout. And some of the other objectives I'll walk through next. Next slide. Replacing the 89 bridge is a critical piece of the project. And these images show the bridge constriction and the eroded conditions of the stream channel. So on the top there, you can see how it's this culvert that really constricts the stream and causes a lot of erosion and stream bank cutting in that channel. Next slide. The Forest Service is also including recreation improvements in this project. So as soon as the stream is restored, we'll take that opportunity to reconfigure some of the camping, some of the parking, and the circulation on the site, because this is just an opportunity to improve the experience there at Meeks Bay. And with that, including some interpretive opportunities. So the idea is to include an interpretive trail around that stream restored area on the site. Next slide. So I'll walk you through a little bit of the process that we use to engage the public and kind of where we are now on the project. So the Forest Service scoped the project in 2018, and that proposed action at the time included a pier and it included a boat ramp. And the idea there was to replace the motorized boating access that would be removed by restoring the marina to natural condition. So when this project was scoped, there was a lot of concern raised from the public on any new infrastructure at Meeks Bay. There was a lot of response saying that, hey, why do we need to do this? We'd like to keep Meeks Bay the way it is. And so I think the Forest Service realized they needed to take a step back and do a more robust public engagement process before diving into the environmental analysis. And that's where they approached TRPA. And that's that agreement in 2020 where we came in to help with that. So we hired the consulting firm that I mentioned earlier, and we conducted a stakeholder survey, and that was based on a lot of the comments we got during scoping. And then we formed the stakeholder group that I mentioned earlier, and we created a website. We have this really cool website that we include all of the postings on. We have all the updates. We include an interactive surveys and maps and things like that. So in the last 2 years, we've been working with our stakeholder group, with the public, doing some workshops, and that helped us to develop the alternatives that we included in the environmental analysis. And where we are now is that we have put that analysis out for public comment over this past summer. And then now we're revising that document based on comments we received and responding to those comments. Next slide. So during this whole public engagement process, we tried out some new tools. We had this interactive platform called Open Town Hall, which I don't know if you've seen this, but it's a way you can show a site or a platform on a web-based platform where folks can actually pick sites on a map and then pull those sites out and make specific comments to what they'd like to see on that site. So those little bubbles kind of show out where, what do you want to see at the lake? What do you want to see at the campground? And folks can weigh in on that. So we did that. We also had a couple of articles in Tahoe in Depth about Meeks Bay and the importance of the project. We created rack cards and we distributed those throughout Meeks Bay, all throughout the summer, to everybody who entered Meeks Bay to the campground. So we hope that drummed up a lot of interest in the project and got folks engaged. Next slide. So after all of this outreach and engagement, what are we hearing from the stakeholders and the public? And in general, we would say that most folks are supportive of stream restoration, and the majority continue to favor a limited to no new development kind of model or alternative for the site. They'd like to see a separation between the two different experiences that we have at Meeks Bay today, which is the more developed resort side versus a little bit quieter experience at the campground side beach. Also, with a desire to minimize conflicts between all of the various users on the site. There's a concern that by allowing any more motorized access, there would be conflicts between motorized boats and paddlers and swimmers. So there wasn't a lot of support for a pier or another boat ramp to be placed on the site. Next slide. So I'll dive a little bit into the project and the preferred alternative now. This slide shows the elements of all of the alternatives that are common. So in each of the environmental alternatives would be replacing the 89 bridge, and this would allow for a bigger span and for the stream restoration project to occur. It would also include a multi-use or bike ped bridge in the center of the project. You can see that line there, and that would be a pedestrian only type bridge. There'd be interpretive features and also some improved paddlecraft storage. So there was a desire to have more areas to store kayaks and paddle boards, not only on the resort side, but also down at the campground side. Next slide. All right. So we developed 4 action alternatives based on the work that the agencies, stakeholders, and with input from the public. And if you'd like to see a comparison of the details of those different alternatives, those are included on page 263 of your packet. The primary differences between the alternatives were related to various configurations of parking, camping, the trail through the site, and then whether or not we would relocate cabins at the resort. The project component that raised the most interest was whether or not to include a pier. So one of those alternatives did include a 300-foot long motorized pier, and this was in response to the desire to provide motorized boating access that was replacing that was removed from the marina, and a mooring location for the Meeks Bay Fire District, because they did request that we look at this as one of the alternatives. And we're hoping to, another alternative included a short pedestrian pier, which would allow people to walk out and get closer to the lake. And this would be a viewing pier about 100 feet long. So now I'll just walk you through this as the preferred alternative, starting from the top of the site. You'll see the yellow areas are the beach. And in the preferred alternative, we would be moving the cabins that are right on the beach back. And that would allow for beach restoration to occur there. There would be some slight expansions of the day use area. And then the parking would be also formalized, where there's a lot of dirt parking there now, would now be made as formal parking. The camping would just be slightly improved, basically. There's not a lot of changes there with the camping on the resort side. And then you'll see the little orange line, that is the new trail that's being proposed to connect with the trail that already ends at Meeks Bay at the resort there. And that trail would come through the site, cross over the bridge, the restored creek, and then over to the campground on the south side, where we'd move some of the parking back and the camping away from that restoration area, expand the day use, and then the beach there would have a movable paddlecraft launch. And this was for an ADA accessible launch. So folks can get on with a wheelchair, they can get onto their kayak, and this could be moved along the beach there. The trail would connect with out to the highway and up to the bridge as well. And we would coordinate that trail alignment with the 89 trail, West Shore Trail that we're working on, and you'll hear about next. Next slide. So I realized I did not touch on the environmental findings of the analysis, so I'll do that briefly. With the environmental analysis, mainly we found positive effects of this project because this is a restoration project. We did find with the alternative that included a pier that there would be significant and unavoidable impacts to scenic resources by adding a pier to Meeks Bay. We did find that by removing the slips at Meeks Bay, that would have an impact on localized access for motorized boats on the West Shore. We would plan to return those slips to the mooring pool so that other marinas could apply to add moorings to their marinas. However, there's no guarantee that those moorings would go back to the West Shore. So we do recognize that that does remove an experience for motorized boaters at Meeks Bay. We did also find that there would be a short-term impact during construction, as the noise levels would be quite high during some of the construction period. So that would be a short-term impact during construction of the bridge. And then some of the next steps is we'll be completing the environmental document, and we'll bring that to you probably in April or May for consideration. And then there'll be work continuing to be done on aquatic invasive species management. We have funding left in the agreement with the Forest Service to complete a site survey and to start designing the fish structure. This is like a weir structure that would be placed in the creek. And the most exciting news is that Caltrans has really taken the lead on the bridge replacement project, and they've identified significant funding source to replace the bridge. And so they're taking the lead on that, and they're working with our team to get that designed and to get that going, construction funding, design funding for that bridge. And with that, I think I will open it up to questions before we move on to the next topic.
Thanks, Rebecca, for the presentation. That was great. Lots of information there, lots to digest. Who has questions or comments for Rebecca on the APC?
No question.
Oh, Steve, go ahead.
Just to comment, Mr. Chairman, so the very interesting thing about this particular project, it's not the only one, but certainly it really took place, the public outreach and the work took place during COVID and was conducted largely on Zoom and virtually. And I thought that the folks who handled that did a really good job, such that the public comments, various perspectives, I think they felt they had an opportunity to weigh in. And so again, I followed this project from the very start, a very interesting project. And I just want to commend the folks, TRPA, Forest Service, and others who handled that challenge of doing public outreach during COVID quite well, I thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Ms. Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you. Rebecca, great presentation. I think it's an exciting project. I agree with Steve about the outreach. It sounds like you did some great outreach during a challenging time. So thank you for that. I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit more about the, alternative, particularly alternative 2 in the pedestrian pier. And then maybe just to kind of clarify non-motorized boat access, like if you're going with the preferred alternative, I would assume alternative 4. So can you talk about non-motorized boater access without the pedestrian pier? Like how, you know what I mean? What's the difference really between the pedestrian pier and the advantages for non-motorized boating access versus the preferred alternative?
Okay. Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying, just trying to distinguish between the different piers and how that would affect access.
Right, right.
So the motorized pier, we're calling it the motorized pier because it would need to be 300 feet long in order to reach a navigable depth for motorized boats to access it during low lake. So that was the minimum length that we needed for that. And in that particular alternative, there would be the allowance for folks to moor temporarily on the pier, get off, walk to the site, come to Meeks Bay. The other alternative we looked at was the shorter, we call viewing or pedestrian pier, about 100 feet. And that wouldn't allow any boats to moor on it because it would not be out far enough. And it wouldn't really have any boating access at all. It's just folks to walk out there. They can sit at the end. They can look at the lake. We have a few of those around. I think even at Sugar Pine, there's one like that. It's a little farther out, but same kind of concept. Yeah. And then as it is now, there is a swim zone out there at Meeks Bay. So they try to keep motorized boats. Motorized boats can still come to Meeks Bay and drop anchor. That's not going to stop. It's just a matter of whether or not they can come in and use a pier, get off, and come into the site.
Yeah, that helps. Thanks. I've been out there in a boat. It's challenging, right, to navigate in there to begin with. And then also just the potential conflict between, swimmers or non-motorized boaters and motorized. I definitely understand that conflict. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Mr. Drake, go ahead.
I didn't have any, I kind of had a question that Crystal mostly addressed with her question. So thanks for that. Good presentation, Rebecca. And I just want to say, I think Meeks Bay is an absolute gem of Lake Tahoe. And this is a great kind of modernization of it. I mean, both the restoration project and the pedestrian improvements, and also something that Jason Drew brought up in a previous meeting. We need to really work on non-motorized recreational access to the lake. And I think these improvements are going to make a big difference. So I'm really happy to see it. I'm also happy to see the ADA access ramp for the lake. I think that's a really great addition, and there aren't many of those on the lake. So well done. Thanks.
Agreed. Well said. Thank you, Kevin. Who else has questions or comments? I'll jump in quickly. Rebecca, can I just ask you, and you touched on a little bit of this, but I think this is an amazing project, just like Kevin stated. And you've done a lot of public outreach. To me, two key groups stand out. One is the Washoe tribe, which you mentioned. And the second is marina, people who had their boats in that marina, I'll just say, people who really use that marina. Can you just talk about engagement with those two groups and generalized feedback and how you incorporated their feedback into the preferred alternative?
Sure. Yeah, with the Washoe tribe, they kind of play two different roles here too, because they are actually the concessionaire for the Meeks Bay Resort. So we've been in touch with them in that role, as well as representing the tribe as a government. And both, we've invited both of those entities basically to participate in our working group, which they have on and off with our stakeholder group. And what we heard mostly from the Washoe tribe is that they'd like to see things as natural as possible, really, focusing on that restoration piece as the centerpiece and the quiet recreation. So that, I would say, is a key message. We've been out to the site with tribal representatives as well a number of times, walking around, talking about the interpretive opportunities, looking at the meadow as well, and how this project would connect with the meadow restoration project and how trail connections might be made and some of the interpretive programming and things like that. So we'll continue to work with them on this, as well as with the bridge design, because their environmental team has expressed an interest to be involved in the fish management as well. I know that Lahontan cutthroat trout, they do a reintroduction here at Meeks Creek. And so the idea here is to really improve the habitat for that as well. So I see them continuing to play a role on this project with all the different elements as we build it. And then with the marina groups, there is a Meeks Bay Marina, part of an association, or they're a group. And so we have them on our stakeholder group as well as the Marina Association for the lake. And not surprising, they would love to retain the marina if they could, because they're used to having their boats have a place to moor here. So I think that they were not excited about the preferred alternative. They prefer to have the marina retain. We did look at different options to reconfigure the marina and to do a smaller marina or something that's off to the side. And it really wasn't feasible for the Forest Service from a financial standpoint to operate a smaller marina. And it also wouldn't really make sense within the environmental footprint of the restoration area. So I think we all agreed that that wasn't going to be a feasible alternative. So we removed that for consideration. The one thing we included in the environmental that I touched on was that we will have those moorings available lake-wide for other marinas to incorporate. If they do want to add moorings, they can use that pool of 119 moorings and add them to another marina. And so folks who have a boat could potentially moor their boat somewhere else on the West Shore or elsewhere.
Okay, thank you so much. That's helpful just to understand that. I also just want to say to my APC members, I think this is our chance to provide any, Rebecca already described this, but just to put a point on it, we can, this is our chance to provide any direction that we can on important aspects to consider in the environmental process that maybe we don't think are being touched on enough. So if anyone has any comments particular to the environmental process and what we'll potentially see when it comes back for a formal recommendation to the governing board, keep that in mind and please speak up if you have anything. Any final thoughts before I go to public on this one? Not seeing any other hands. Okay, here we go over to public comment on this particular item. This is the first part of the West Shore update on Meeks Bay restoration. Again, to participate, go to trpa.gov, click on the APC meeting, January 11, 2023. If any member of the public wishes to address the APC on this item, please raise your hand now by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your telephone.
Mr. Chair, we have a few hands raised. Kirk Robinson, if you unmute, you can address the APC.
Thank you. My name's Kirk Robinson. Along with my siblings, I own the cabin that sits just south of Meeks Creek, opposite the campground / firehouse. First of all, I'd like to compliment TRPA, the Forest Service, and Lahontan for doing a great job of listening through this whole process. I benefited definitely from the pandemic outreach because I'm talking to you from the Seattle area where I live. And I make the journey down to Meeks Bay a couple times every year to enjoy the area that has been in the family. This cabin's been in the family for about 100 years. As I said, I think they did a great job of listening. It resulted in a well thought out preferred alternative. The key points for me being the rehabilitation of particularly the creek and also the beach by not including a marina in the preferred alternative. And I think one of the key things to that has been the fact that there hasn't been an operational marina for, I think it's 7 years now, but really for the 5 years prior to the process being put in place. And people came to understand what Meeks Bay could be without the marina and without piers. And they like it. They very much like it. Unfortunately, Meeks Bay has become one of the more crowded beaches of recent memory, but I think we'll take that over having a whole beach full of power boats, which if you go back in history, you can find plenty of pictures that show that. Also, thank you to Rebecca for the news on the Caltrans taking charge of the bridge, because I don't think the rehabilitation of the creek would be possible without replacing the current bridge culvert with a full bridge with out the water, the 2-foot waterfall that occurs when the water's really flowing. And this all brings it back to returning the area to as natural a process as possible. And then focusing, I would say, the entire Meeks Bay area on non-motorized recreation, because, beyond the focus of the resort and the beach area, you have the trailhead back into Desolation Wilderness, and there are opportunities for both winter and summer recreation that don't require the water as well. So thank you very much. And I've enjoyed the process, even though I wasn't on the stakeholder committee. They allowed me to participate as if I did.
Great. Thank you for your input, Mr. Robinson. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair, the next hand raised is Judith Tornese. Judith, if you unmute, you can address the commission.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I just want to say on behalf of Friends of the West Shore that we commend the entire Meeks Bay team, TRPA, U.S. Forest Service, and the Water Board for this for the great process that they performed. They engaged all aspects of the community and did just a general great job. Friends of the West Shore does support the preferred alternative number 4, and it will provide the public with a safe, clean beach and water area to recreate in. And we support everything that's been done. So thank you very much for all your work.
Thank you, Judith.
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. I'll go ahead and close public comment. Any final thoughts from APC on Meeks Bay? Okay, Rebecca, let's move on to part 2. This is a briefing on State Route 89 corridor planning. Information can be found on page 253 of your packet. And back to you, Rebecca, to present on this one. You are muted, Rebecca.
Sorry about that. Okay, so this trail will also refer to as the Cascade to Meeks Trail and Cascade to Meeks Trail Study. So this image here shows a portion of where that trail would potentially be aligned. And so today we're going to talk about this project, which is an important component of the corridor, the 89 corridor plan. Next slide. So many of you that are attending today may have been involved in that 89 corridor planning process. And this segment of the Tahoe Trail was really one of the first actions that was identified to move forward from this planning project. So the 89 corridor plan also looked at transit improvements as well as parking management strategies, and then completing this Tahoe Trail. This project has been included in multiple regional transportation plans over the years. And so we're happy to be moving forward. And really what we're looking at now is the very initial planning stages for this trail segment on the West Shore. Next slide. So this image here shows the trail network that we're trying to close the gap in. So this is the image of the Tahoe Trail that would circumnavigate the lake as a seamless trail network for multiple users types. We have had a number of different segments completed recently. The East Shore Trail, most famously up to Santa Harbor, some of the South Shore segments, including on the Greenway, and then some of the West Shore segments are pretty new, like the one that's connecting down to Meeks Bay today, as well as some of the ones over near Tahoe and areas like that. Next slide. So who is guiding the planning work for this project? This is a snapshot of all the agencies and entities involved in this plan. And this really is a continuation of the 89 corridor plan. So we have California State Parks, very important partner in this project, as this trail segment would travel through D.L. Bliss State Park, Emerald Bay State Park as well. The U.S. Forest Service, this segment is along trailheads to popular recreation areas such as Meeks Bay and trailheads into the Desolation Wilderness. We have the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California, as well as El Dorado County, and then Caltrans as the manager of the right-of-way along this corridor. Next slide. So the project area here is literally connecting the existing segments of the Tahoe Trail that we have already completed in the north at Meeks Bay and in the south at Cascade and down towards Camp Richardson. The goals on the slide were developed by the steering committee to achieve that vision that was developed in the corridor management plan. And the intent of this to provide diverse recreation offerings, better manage congestion on the corridor, and enhance the environmental resiliency of this corridor. This trail feasibility study will serve this vision by identifying a trail alignment and complete with amenities. And when I'm talking about amenities, these can be overlooks, historic, interpretive, and cultural opportunities, restrooms, roadway crossings, and so forth along this trail segment. Next slide. So right now we're wrapping up the feasibility analysis and report for this project, and it really was a 3-step process where we took all the data that's out there about the corridor, any of the constraints, the environmental conditions, some of the engineering preliminary looks at this area, the slopes, and we took that information and we created evaluation criteria, and then these were ranked. And all along the way, we had input from the steering committee and stakeholders to kind of weigh in on these different evaluation criteria. And where we are now is completing that recommendation and looking at a preferred alignment and then what those constraints are and opportunities along the corridor. And so that's where we are now with that plan. And I just wanted to mention that Jason Drew with NCE Consultants is here today as part of the Planning Commission, but he will be available to answer any technical questions you might have on this project. And they've been a great team to work with. Next slide. So the evaluation criteria that I alluded to in the last slide really looked at what are some of the major constraints or opportunities in each of these segments of the segment along the corridor. So for example, what are some of how many stream crossings will you have in a particular alignment? What would be, how hard would it be to construct in this particular section? How steep are the slopes? How many roadway crossings or private properties would you need to cross in certain areas? We looked at, with work that we did with the stakeholders, we added some of the evaluation criteria that considered landowners. So how would a particular alignment affect a neighborhood or, cross or need easements and things like that? We also added user experience as part of the criteria. So what would it be like to ride or walk along a particular segment of the trail? Would you be going through the woods? Would you be having a nice view? So there's different ways we looked at evaluating these different alignments. Next slide. Oh, you can click through this, is gonna give you a few. So this is just highlighting some of the stakeholder engagement that we did. And we, like the Meeks Bay project, we created a project website. And the coolest thing about this website, I think, was this interactive map that NCA created. And so as we broke the segment into different sections, the alignments, these alignments were available for folks to zoom in on. They were able to look at rankings. They were able to take interactive surveys on this website to give us information about what they thought about these different options along the way. Next slide. So as we developed this outreach strategy, we did break it down into these identified segments. And that's what we showed on that previous slide, was we created these different segments that folks could zoom in on and say, okay, with the Paradise Flat alignment, we prefer the trail on the highway side or the mountain side, or we like it through this, this right of way. So that was the way that we communicated this 11-mile corridor. Next slide. And so zooming in on the interactive web map, what we did along the way was to take that evaluation criteria and then rank various alignments. So for example, if you see the blue line, that received the highest ranking based on the criteria that was developed, or the red was the third, the lowest, the least feasible based on that criteria. Where you see a black line, that would be an alignment that we had to use that alignment. There was no other way, there's no other option. So in those cases, it stayed black. So folks had the opportunity to look at these different alignments, rankings, and then we took those back to our steering committee, which is the agencies that I listed earlier, to make a final call on which of these alignments we'd actually take fully into that feasibility report. Next slide. So some of the major themes that we heard from the public along the way, really folks were interested in diving in as to fine-grained as possible about a particular segment that they're interested in. And we didn't necessarily have that level of detail, but folks were really interested in as much detail as possible about segments. There was some concerns that this trail would be a destination, similar to what might be happening over the East Shore. And then we need to consider parking and how some of these, some of the trail attractants, per se, would affect the landowners. There was general excitement about the concept of a trail, but also how can we really do this? Is this really feasible? Some of these segments are very, very steep. And then also how would this affect the scenic quality of Emerald Bay and really DLS and places like that. Next slide. So zooming in on one of our segments, I thought I would use Meeks Bay, since we've been talking about Meeks Bay a lot here. And this shows two various alignment options that were looked at. Option A being an alignment where the trail would continue on the lakeside, or option B, it would continue on the mountainside. And both of these have different crossings and implications for neighborhoods. So where would it come through the neighborhood, or would it stay along the highway? Next slide. So in this case, this slide shows the final alignment that was chosen by the agencies to take forward in the feasibility report. So that broad pink line is where we determined this would be the most feasible. So for Meeks Bay, the alignment would go along the mountainside and would include some crossings that would access into Meeks Bay Resort. So in the south, you would cross, there would have to be some kind of a undercrossing there, as well as in the north to get to the resort. And then the feasibility report in this case is looking at two different alignments, one along the highway and one through the neighborhood there. Next slide. So what you'll see in this feasibility report will be individual constructible segments. And in each of these segments, we have different considerations. So in a particular segment, what would it take to design this? How many more special studies would we need? Are there culturally significant resources or a number of stream crossings? What would it take to build this? What would be the traffic management scenarios during that time of building? They also were able to do an estimate of tree removal for the various segments, and then what permitting and environmental is anticipated. The report also includes recommended phasing of implementing those different segments. Next slide. So what's next? So right now we have the report in the hands of the agencies in the draft phase stage, and we're looking at that, providing feedback to the consultants. Once we have that finalized, it'll be available to the public and on our website. We'll have a public information session and webinar on that, and then we'll bring it back to TRPA as well for a committee presentation. The next steps after that really are to identify a champion for the project. You know, who would be the lead agencies? Would we look at the environmental as a programmatic environmental document, or would we look at it in segments? So these are still to be determined as we move forward with this project. And with that, I will open it up for questions. And if Jason is available to answer questions, he's welcome as well.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca, for that presentation. That was great. I'm going to go to my fellow APC members. It's your turn to weigh in. Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to comment that, you know, this is really a lot to take on, this section for such a trail, but I commend everybody involved. You know, right now, Highway 89 itself, which is very narrow, particularly in the section from Cascade to Meeks, where we're talking about, it's expected to handle cyclists, some pedestrians in some areas, you know, vehicles, parking areas. It's a lot. And from a mobility perspective and from a recreational opportunity perspective, putting a trail in such as being discussed in this project is really a breakthrough, and because it'll take some of the pressure off Highway 89 itself. So again, this is a tough one to take on. I commend everybody for getting the bull by the horns and doing it. I know there's a lot of comments by people in the area. Some of them are sort of, you know, concerned about impacts to neighborhoods. I think all that's being weighed very carefully, but this is going to be a tremendous asset. And again, as the transportation representative here, really relieves some of the pressure on Highway 89 itself. So good job. Thanks for the presentation.
Thank you, Steve. Ms. Jacobson.
Yeah, thank you. Rebecca, great presentation again. Super exciting project. And again, I think the outreach on this is looks like it was done really well. So thanks for that. I had a comment and a question. The comment is just on the parking. I appreciate the feedback that you got, you know, in your outreach on parking, and because as Steve just mentioned, it's pretty narrow in there. And, you know, I understand and appreciate concern about traffic generation and where are you going to put folks to access this facility. So curious about that. And I think it sort of ties into this, really the regional conversation about parking management. So definitely would, look to you and, the team to kind of think about that as you continue to advance the project. And then the question has to do with the alignment as it goes where it splits. It looks like you're analyzing two alignments there at the end where it goes, one goes through the neighborhood and the other one along the highway. Just curious about the one through the neighborhood. Was that selected to analyze because it's not as steep, like the slope is better? It looked like it kind of did a little, kind of traverse through the neighborhood. Just curious about that.
Yeah, I'm wondering if Jason can take off his APC hat and answer that question.
Sure. Is it possible for us to go back to that slide, Rebecca?
Yes, it is. I think it was just a couple slides back.
Yeah,
That
right
one
here.
right there. Yeah.
Thank you. So Crystal, what you're speaking about is where there's two options towards the bottom of this picture. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. Just curious about that.
So what happened is that, as Steve alluded to, and you can all imagine, there's a reason this portion of the basin is the last one to be considered for planning and implementation of the trail for a variety of physical, environmental constraints that exist within the corridor. So in each of these segments, the one we're looking at is the Meeks Bay segment that goes into the Tahoe Hills neighborhood. In this case, there were actually about 4 or 5 different alternatives leaving Meeks Bay and heading to the south. And after we did the quantitative or objective data-based analysis, the two options, the one on the highway and the one through the neighborhood, came out very close. And then when we considered the input from the community, from stakeholders, and from the agencies, it was decided that both of those would be moved forward to be evaluated more fully in the feasibility study, because the reality is the physical constraints in this area are going to make any trail very difficult. The slopes within the neighborhood in some places are very steep, but there's a lot less traffic. There's more area to work with. The option that's within the state route is very narrow. The slopes are very steep. And our goal with the feasibility study was to be able to determine, is it feasible to actually design and implement a trail from Meeks Bay all the way to the south end by Cascade, for those that are familiar with it, to tie into the trail that comes from Camp Richardson. And in this location, we believe that it is feasible to put a trail through here, but the constraints are so significant, both within the right of way and within the neighborhood. We wanted both of these options. Ultimately, it will allow whatever agency partner decides to move forward with this segment of the trail, they will have then two options to work with to really dive into design to determine which one is the most feasible and practical to implement. So that's why there's two located in that site. They're both feasible, but there are significant constraints with each of them. And so the agencies wanted that option moving forward.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for weighing in. I bet, Drew, are there other sections along the trail where you're evaluating two alignments?
This is the only spot where, for the combination of reasons, there's two included. Everywhere else, through the objective or quantitative analysis, followed by the qualitative input from stakeholders, the community, and the steering committee, everywhere else it was we were able to identify a single alternative that was fully evaluated in the feasibility study.
Good.
And
all right.
I guess what I would say on that is, as you can all imagine, given what's been presented by Rebecca, any trail that ultimately moves forward is going to have substantial considerations associated with it. And what we've shared with all of the agency partners and the steering committee is that there is no single answer. There is no alternative for the trail that checks all the boxes. There's going to be a give and take no matter what trail is ultimately built. And so what we've tried to really express with the steering committee and the potential partners who may be implementing parts of the project is everybody's going to have to give a little. There's absolutely going to be impacts through this corridor to build the trail. And that's where through the environmental process, we'll need to balance those impacts with what are the improvements and benefits that come from the trail, and how do you offset those impacts, mitigate them, avoid them where you can, minimize them to the extent possible, and then mitigate them when there are impacts that are unavoidable.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Ms. Carr.
Thank you. I've got a couple different areas that I'd like to ask about. One is that when we've had discussions about other bike trail segments around the basin, there's a split between your just average recreational bicyclist, what might be out there with their families and their kids and their parents and those sorts of things. And then what's been referred to off and on over the years is the lycra-clad cyclists. So how have the discussions gone with regard to those differences in cycling usage types? Are you anticipating the lycra-clad to be on your trail, or are you anticipating that they're going to stay on the roadway? If they're going to stay on the roadway, have you gotten any traction with Caltrans to potentially widen the road to make it safer in these sections with more shoulder and those sorts of things for that type of activity? I'm just curious where some of those discussions might have gone.
I can start, and then Jason, you can weigh in. I would fall into the category of lycra and the ones that go slowly. So I would say that this trail in some sections, those speedy bikers will want to get off their bike and probably walk, because, coming through Emerald Bay or somewhere like that, where they'll have a lot of folks walking, there probably will be, they're not going to be able to go very fast. So I'm not sure at Emerald Bay if there's consideration of adding any travel lanes for bikers, but I know at Meeks Bay, for example, when we're talking with Caltrans about the bridge, we will definitely be incorporating not only the trail, either as a component of the bridge or as a separate adjacent bridge, and travel lanes for bikes as well. So that's, specific to Meeks Bay, because there's a project going on there with the bridge replacement. So I don't know, Jason, if you had any other conversations in that light.
Yeah, Jennifer, good question. There has been a lot of discussion coming out of the corridor study and into this feasibility stage for this corridor about users, like who are the users of the trail going to be. And this is certainly a multi-use trail, and it's really even more vast than the users you had mentioned. So there's obviously all of the different types of pedestrians, from walkers to sightseers to runners. And on the cyclist side, it's the family cyclists, the recreational cyclists, and then the serious cyclists. And in addition to that, the other thing that got a lot of attention during this process is e-bikes and the use of e-bikes. That has certainly become a real focal point for both recreationists, community users, and those just interested in multi-use trails. So the bottom line is that the trail has been planned for a wide variety of those users to be using it. So we've, from the beginning, talked about trying to have as wide a trail as possible, maybe even wider than a typical class 1 trail in places. The other part that comes into this is not only the kind of recreationist, but who the users are and where they're trying to get, because you're going to have visitors And then you're going to have people who are trying to commute between neighborhoods or between recreation sites, whether that's a full-time resident who is wanting to get to a recreation site from their house. It's a visitor who's at a campground and is trying to get to another recreation site. So there's certainly going to be a wide variety of users. We have had discussions with the steering committee about the fact that this trail is going to need to accommodate a wide variety of users. And there's also going to be a need for improvements to the highway corridor, because this trail is not going to solve all of the non-motorized needs within the corridor. And so Caltrans is aware of that. I think the main challenge that Caltrans has right now is that they do not have overly wide right-of-way through a lot of this corridor. And much of the right-of-way has very steep slopes on either side, whether it's, cut slopes on both sides or a cut and fill slope, or just natural topography falls off quickly. So they are aware of it. It's something that's on their radar. And I think it goes back to this feasibility study was really focused on the trail itself, but it's hard to detach that from parking, from what's going to happen with the highway, from just a safety and also transit. So those items are being handled separately, the parking, the transit, and what's going to happen with safety on the highway. But those topics have been brought up in the steering committee meetings.
Thank you for that additional information. That's really helpful, and it'd be interesting to have a concept of a trail that's wide enough to maybe have like a fast lane or something like that. So that's great that those discussions are happening. My other question is related to the parking idea that a couple of people have touched on. Then you just mentioned transit, because we have a lot of conversations about sustainable recreation and the parking problem that already exists around Emerald Bay. It's just a complete nightmare. And I could absolutely see the need for parking, having experienced the East Shore Trail and the parking needs there. I assume that in these discussions, the public transportation is an integral part of the discussions. I'm assuming they're engaging, where we could even have less parking potentially and encourage people to take the bus to various points where they can put their bike on and off the rack on the bus, or have reliable spots with from a few miles apart or something, where the bus can pick you up and take you to another spot, and you can experience a different segment of the trail, but not necessarily have to deal with large parking lots and those sorts of things, just to get people to the different scenic areas along this route.
Okay, if I jump in here, Michelle Blickert for the
Michelle, I'm
record.
just about to, but go for it.
Thank you, Jennifer. And that plays right into what Crystal also mentioned, right? Is that the parking conversation, the transit conversation is really a regional conversation, especially through this corridor. And that bigger picture is being considered. So we are thinking about parking management on this corridor, learning some lessons from what 28 is doing right now in some of those paid parking and peak pricing. And so we're investigating that and really thinking more holistically. The trail is one element, and you nailed it. Parking management and transit access is a big component of this. This is the tough piece. I think the others are still, also challenging, but we really want to work within what we have today and manage it better, protect the environment, get those cars off of the sides of the hill, and actually start to manage them in parking lots. So we are working a little bit on that. We have a high level kind of parking congestion study and management study. These corridors, 89 and 28, continue to be top priorities for improvements for all the reasons we've been talking about today, from the restoration to travel options. Like Steve said, this is a game changer and can really do a lot for us. So I appreciate all the thoughtful comments on parking and transit.
Thanks, Michelle, for jumping in and helping. Steve, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we're pushing on the noon hour here. I don't want to unnecessarily extend the conversation. Very very good discussion and important presentation. The other challenge that we have on 89, and we have it on 28 too, where we have, parking, paid parking installed, is just the broadband and the connectivity. You have to have that as part of the overall solution so that people can get information about is parking available or not, those kinds of things. And so one of the discussions that came up during the 89 corridor plan development was the importance of improving broadband along this part of the highway corridor. So just to put that forward as another issue in this challenging area. Thank you.
Yep. Good point, Steve. APC members with other comments or questions? Okay, I'm going to move us over to public comment on this. I don't think I need to read again how to participate. Hopefully everyone's here. Members of the public who wish to comment on the State Route 89 corridor planning project, please raise your hand now or dial *9 on your phone and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member.
Mr. Chair, we have a hand raised. Doug Flaherty, if you unmute, you can address the APC.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Doug Flaherty, Tahoe, cleanair.org. So the half truth that keeps echoing here from the proponents of a trail system and increased mobility and what have you is that this particular trail was just mentioned is going to take pressure off Highway 89. That is unfactual. It's subjective. It's arbitrary. It's capricious. It's controversial, and it's just not true. This is going to be a destination trail. I live in Incline Village, and I can assure you, my clock's not running. I can still see a 3-minute there. I can assure you that East Shore Trail has been a disaster. We're trying to arrange for bacteria studies for the people that deposit their feces and urine and their dog crap all up and down the access to the lake now. It is being overrun. Our pristine Nevada East Shore for the Nevada representative has been a complete failure. Eventually, I think there's a lot of people that want to see that removed to the other side of the highway. So, I guess the credibility is really lacking here with folks that continue to, pass on this half truth or whatever it is, that it takes pressure off our roadways. That's just simply not true. This is going to increase capacity, human capacity. And with the end comment, basically you guys need to support as an advisory planning commission, a recommendation of the TRPA that these projects get stopped until there is a complete cumulative impact environmental assessment and EIS regarding all of the Lakeshore Trail projects. The TRPA is getting away with this by doing this incrementally. And if legal action is the only issue, no one wants to see it, but you guys have to step up and provide leadership to the board. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mr. Flaherty.
The next hand raised is Judith Tornese. Judith, if you unmute, you can address the board.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm president of Friends of the West Shore and wanted to say that we appreciate the process on this and the public involvement in this project. I'd like to have some clarification. There were 2 routes around Meeks Bay that were preferred. I think those are the 2 pink lines, and there is a blue line that is noted as being an analysis line. I don't know whether that was considered or is it part of the preferred route? If you could clarify that. And lastly, I wanted to mention that there is substantial concern about the impact of the bike route through the Tahoe Hills neighborhood. And I ask that you continue to get more input from that community before finalizing the alternative through that area. So if somebody could clarify the line, the blue line, and how that impacts the other preferred alternatives. Thank you.
Thanks, Judith.
Do we want to look at that slide again, if you don't mind, Tracy? Jason, do you want to jump in on that?
So there were multiple alternatives included in Meeks Bay. You see here, there's a salmon collared line, and then there's a blue line with yellow dashes within it. So there were two alternatives that were evaluated both quantitatively and qualitatively. And so those are the two options you're seeing. One is salmon colored, one is blue. The one that was selected by the steering committee is the one that's salmon colored.
Thanks, Jason. Hopefully that helps, Judith. Catherine, I'm assuming there's no other public comments. I don't see any other hands raised.
Judith has put her hand back up. I'm not sure if I'm able to call on her again.
John, how do we typically handle that?
Typically, if you make your comments, then those are the comments that you've made. However, I leave it to your discretion whether or not the question has been answered for Judith.
I don't think it has. I think there was another part of her question about whether there was going to be a further opportunity for input and analysis. It sounded to me like, if I understood Mr. Drew correctly, that yes, there would be.
Yeah, Judith, do you want to jump in just quickly?
Yes.
Oh, you just remuted yourself, it looks like.
Oh, okay. All right.
There
Can
you
you
go.
hear me now? All right. Well, I just wanted to clarify the salmon colored line appears to split off into two areas, two different directions. So how, if that is a preferred alternative, how does that work out?
Both of those, we talked about this quite a bit. Both of those are being analyzed in the feasibility study. So we haven't chosen, there's an option to decide between the two of those based on further analysis, but it will not be both of those alignments, just one of them.
Okay, and then the blue line is not being considered now. Is that correct?
That's what I understand.
Okay, all right. Thank you for thank you for the clarification.
If I could just jump in real quickly. This feasibility report is, it's informational, and it doesn't mean that in the future, when we look at an environmental analysis with, an EIS, EIR, you could also look at other alternatives. So this doesn't preclude the lead agencies from in the future looking at that alignment again, for example. So I think what we're trying to communicate is that the lead agencies chose the salmon colored line and then looked at two different options in this feasibility report to get as much information as possible to move forward at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, one more hand went up. Kirk Robinson, if you unmute, you can address the commission.
Yeah, again, Kirk Robinson, have a summer cabin there in Meeks Bay right along the creek, and have been participating in this process. And just want to note that I've walked the extent of all of the options through that area. And as has been noted, it's going to be quite a challenge whichever way you decide to go to get from Meeks Bay over into the Rubicon area. That hillside off of Tahoe Hills is quite steep. And I personally was trying to see how I could get a trail that looks like the trail that comes into Meeks Bay from Sugar Pine in place in any of the potential options and had trouble doing so. So good luck with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk. We all acknowledge this will be a difficult project to build, but I think we all see it has tremendous value as well.
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm going to close public comment and go back to APC. Any final thoughts? Thank you all for engaging. I think we all look forward to staying engaged. There's a lot more to come on all of this, as was mentioned, and a long way to go. A lot of hard work, but we can get there. And Mr. Flaherty, just quickly, there will be, I think we mentioned quite a few times, quite a bit of further environmental analysis on this project and public engagement opportunities. So encourage everyone to stay involved. This was an informational only item, and so no action is required. More to come. And thank you, Rebecca, for presenting. Have a good rest of the day. I'm going to move us now to, that concludes item 5, which is all of our hearings, and we'll go to item 6, which is reports. And I'm going to go to either Ms. Reagan or Mr. Hester for the executive director report, including the Tahoe in brief December report and upcoming topics.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you will note, it's called the monthly update now. It's Tahoe in brief, and we have replaced the quarterly report with that, and so you'll be getting that every month. If you have input on that format that you'd like to provide to me offline, please do so. There are, in terms of action on your previous items, there were no recommendations in October considered at the governing board, so I have nothing to report on that. In terms of upcoming items, in addition to the monthly report you'll get each meeting, date to be determined on Placer, Tahoe Basin Area Plan amendments, date to be determined on Washoe, Tahoe Area Plan amendments. Annual report will be coming forward, EIS, EIR, EIS for the Upper Truckee River Golf Course where you took your tour will be coming forward. And as a segue to Mr. Marshall, he plans to do an open meeting law review. And I will, before relinquishing the mic to the general counsel, ask our new executive director, Julie Regan, if she'd like to say anything.
Thank you, Mr. Hester, and really happy to see you all, Advisory Planning Commission members, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Julie Reagan here. I just wanted to say thank you to all the well-wishers after congratulating me on my new position with the agency. I am so honored to be leading Team Tahoe into the future, and 2023 is certainly off to an exciting start with all of this snow, atmospheric rivers in spades, and really some potentially life-threatening weather to go along with that. And people, sadly, in California have lost their lives to flooding. And I think it just underscores the challenges that we all face in managing the impacts of climate change, managing the impacts to our beloved lake and visitation, and supporting a healthy economy, but not at the expense of our precious natural resources. The conversations that you had today were very thoughtful. I think it's exciting that we're starting the new year with some really meaty and substantive issues. So we're going to be counting on you to be a part of that team and to advise the governing board and our staff working collaboratively. So just really appreciate all the support that I've had over the last several months. I look forward to meeting with you throughout the year. I do want to make individual appointments happen just to hear your thoughts and concerns and hopes and dreams for the future. And I couldn't be happier to be harnessing the power and the talent that sits around the dais, the virtual dais today. And I look forward to seeing you all in person when we get through some of these weather events and we can convene together one-on-one versus on Zoom. So just really appreciate your service and ask you to be ready for an exciting year. We're going to have a lot to tackle together. So appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. We appreciate you being here and we all wish you well on your new role. It's great. And thank you, Mr. Hester, too. Good to see you. And with that, I'm going to go to Mr. Marshall for the General Counsel status report.
We have nothing to report since last December. Excuse me, yes.
Okay.
Looking forward to a happy and healthy 2023.
Agreed. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Okay, APC members, we have lost a few here just recently who had to sign off for the lunch hour. We are running a little long today. So I'm going to go to APC members just quickly for any relevant updates. And I'm going to go right on my screen here and go to Ms. Chandler first.
Thank you and Happy New Year to everybody. Two things to report. I'm very pleased that the South Lake Tahoe City Council appointed me to another 2 years on this committee. So I look forward to being an active member over the next 2 years. And as a member of the Tahoe Keys Water Quality, we are very pleased that we were able to get over 50% of our homeowners to vote on future funding for the controlled methods test. 82% of those people that did vote approved the funding, and we're very excited about moving ahead with this project to get rid of the invasive species in the Tahoe Keys. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Mr. Teixeira.
Nothing further today, Mr. Chair. Thank you all. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you, Steve. How about Ms. Morales O'Neill?
Yes, I think the only thing to update for us is we do have our new commissioner, Charla Hales, that is now on the Board of Commissioners. So we're excited to have her, and I think she's going to be a really positive impact for our community. So I'm excited to see that. Also, I am very actively working on the South Shore Area Plan amendments that I believe started in 2015 and then again in 18, and then it just kept kind of being pushed down the path and nothing was happening. So I'm working very hard on that and hope to complete that in this year, is to get those amendments that have been sitting there for a while, get those completed. Other than that, we are, that's all I have to report with Douglas County.
All right, thank you, Kate. Ms. Jacobson?
Yeah, thank you. I just have a couple items. As John Hester noted, the county has been preparing a package of Tahoe Basin Area Plan amendments. They're focused on reinvestment or redevelopment in our town centers, and then also encouraging the construction of affordable housing. And that started its way through the public process last fall, starting with a workshop before our planning commission, and then it did go before the RPIC for a workshop in December. And we are doing some additional outreach. So we're looking to hold a workshop. So just wanted to point that out. We're doing some additional outreach before it would come back through our planning commission and board, and then on to TRPA. So more to come on that. Just kind of definitely heard from the public, they wanted a little bit more outreach or touch points to talk through some of the proposals that are part of that package. So and then the other thing I just wanted to point out that we did hire, we have a new hire, which is a deputy director of our public works in Tahoe. It actually was, that position was Peter Kratz's old position, and it was filled with Rebecca Tabor, who has been with the county for a number of years, I think over 20 years, working in the Auburn office. I worked side by side with her for the whole time I've been at the county. She comes from land use, so she's an engineer that has been working with me in Cedra. Totally familiar with Tahoe, has done a lot of work up here. So we're excited to have her. And I just wanted to point out, she is going to be focusing on implementation of the county's Resort Triangle Transportation Plan, which includes a parking management program. So we're going to be diving into that work effort, as well as adaptive management of the two main corridors in North Tahoe, Highway 89 and 267. So more to come on that as well, but we're super excited to have her come on. She starts on the 17th. So it'll be great to have dedicated staff working towards implementation of that plan. That's it for me.
Thanks, Crystal. Ms. Stoller?
Oh, hi. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Jennifer, I didn't coordinate with you in advance, so I'm sorry if I'm taking one of your updates, but I wanted to let the commission know that the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources has a new director, and his name is James Settlemeyer. He's a long-serving member of the Nevada State Assembly and then later the Senate, and has just recently been appointed by Governor Lombardo. He started on Monday.
Yep, change is afoot in Nevada, we've heard. Thank you, Ellery. Mr. Hitchcock.
Just one item. We have an RFP out right now looking for consultant help in assisting us to start work on our Midtown area plan, which includes what used to be Bijou Tahoe Community Plan, Sierra Track Commercial, Bijou Community Park, and the Bijou Golf Course. So we're excited to get that started in the next couple months.
Good. Thank you. How about Ms. Wyke?
Yeah, not much from me other than just hello. This is my first APC meeting, standing in for Eric Young. We're planning to be taking over his role going forward, and we'll be kind of tag teaming, but I've worked with a lot of you, but those of you who don't know me, I've been with Washoe for 2 years and the city of Southlake previously for 5. So happy to be on board and look forward to working with you all.
Yeah, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Mr. Alling?
Nothing at this point, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, Garth, thanks. And I believe I got everyone. Did I miss anyone? We've lost quite a few members. Okay, my only update is that we have a new board supervisor who was sworn in first of this year, and that is Brooke Lane. She's former city council member, and she will also be sitting on TRPA's board. So we're really excited to have her. She's already jumped in. We've had 2 fairly meaty board meetings already this year, and she's participating well. So that's great. She's going to be a strong Tahoe advocate. So we're happy to have her. And I think I'll conclude APC member reports right there. Thank you all for weighing in, for hanging in there into the lunch hour. We are on now to item 7, which is public interest comments. If any member of the public wishes to address the Advisory Planning Commission, please raise your hand now by clicking the raise hand button at the bottom of your Zoom screen or by dialing *9 on your phone, and you'll be called on and unmuted by a TRPA staff member. Please keep your comments brief and concise. You'll have 3 minutes. Please note APC is prohibited by law from taking immediate action on or discussing issues raised by the public not listed on our agenda. And I'll go over to you, Catherine, for this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Doug Flaherty, if you unmute, you can address the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to the upcoming Tahoe Basin Area Plan amendments, the Washoe Area Plan amendments, the proposed height, density, and coverage amendments by the TRPA, I would endorse a overall cumulative impact EIS addressing these as a whole. Getting to one of the major points that I'd like to see is wildfire evacuation. In June of 2009, a Butte County Civil Grand Jury report concluded that roads leading from Paradise and Upper Ridge communities had significant constraints and capacity limitations on their use as evacuation routes. The report noted a combination of road conditions, which increases the fire danger and the possibility of being closed due to fire and smoke, namely sharp curves, inadequate shoulders, and fire hazards, including fire equipment blocking the roadways. The report also recommended a moratorium on construction in fire-prone areas and a halt to multifamily projects. In September of 2009, the Butte County Board of Supervisors ignored the grand jury report, called it not reasonable, citing improved building codes and fire prevention requirements as arguments against the moratorium. 10 years later, of course, the Camp Fire caused 85 civilian fatalities, with 1 person still missing, and injured 12 civilians and 5 firefighters. I want to point out that there is a difference between a fire evacuation plan and a evacuation route assessment. Fire evacuation plans are usually used by folks like you and government agencies to rubber stamp projects going through the fire evacuation plan process, which is nothing more than identifying various resources and some arrows drawn on a map. That's a big difference between that and evacuation route assessment. The common fire evacuation plan is usually funded by general or grant funding. So to be truly effective, any fire evacuation plan must be foundation-based and build on a data-driven road by road evacuation route assessment. This is the only way to ensure fit for purpose public safety evacuation. And I would appreciate it if you would read my entire written comment today. The elephant in the room for the Tahoe Basin is wildfire evacuation. And specifically, I want to emphasize the upcoming Placer area plan amendments and CEQA. They're not eligible for exemptions under CEQA. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Flaherty. Yeah, just to confirm with you, we did receive your written comment in our email box this morning. So we will read that, and thank you for submitting that.
Mr. Chair, there are no other hands raised to comment on this item.
All right, Catherine, thank you. That closes item 7, and I'm on to item 8, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Garth. I don't need a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Assuming no one is opposed, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 12:21. Stay safe, everyone. Stay dry, stay warm. See you next month.
Thanks, everyone.